Welcome to the Generic Tech Support YouTube channel, a channel that understands that cloud computing is way older than what everybody else believes. Like and subscribe for more videos. Hey guys, so I wanted to talk about this application here called Raven Talon, and I want to say that this is probably the fourth video I'm making on it. I made it a video a couple weeks ago, a week or so ago, on this actual video. I was going to release it, but then actually, believe it or not, I had my wife watch it. She came back and said, I think you're going to piss off Chris Titus. I wouldn't do that. And I think she's probably right. So I'm going to remake the video. And this is a remake of the original Raven video with less pissing off Chris Titus. So, according to the Raven website, we should start off with a fresh Windows 11 system with no configuration whatsoever on it. And that's what this machine was. This machine was a fresh installation minus the WinGet configuration. So it did have WinGet on it, but we didn't really install anything outside of just Steam on it. And I think we installed Firefox through the WinGet configuration. Otherwise, it was a clean Windows 11 machine with nothing on it. It was factory fresh, out of the box, 24H2. We ran the Raven Talon script to do the install. And on the installation, we actually did it twice. The first time we went through it, found that you have to be online for it to work. You can't run it offline. If you run it offline, only half the script works. And the reason why is because it runs a JSON query that pulls PowerShell scripts to run against the system that are located on the Git repository. So for them to work correctly, the system has to pull that data back and then run the actual script. Once it finished out, though, it worked pretty well. It is a debloating tool, if you don't know already, and it does debloat Windows 11. Windows 11 on this system looks a lot cleaner than it did prior. And with the debloating run, I will even say that it does, from a performance aspect, run a lot cleaner. We get a lot more memory requirement, a lot more CPU. However, there are some drawbacks to it as well. And I'd like to go over the pros and cons of the actual configuration script on a freshly built vanilla Windows 11 system. And I'd like to do the same proof of concept that this Raven application did, but I want to do it offline and itemized. Okay, I'm sure you guys heard the Windows 11 boot up in the background, but let's go on to discussing this operating system in more detail before we jump over to our Windows 11 machine and start the process of actually debugging this script and looking at specifically what the script does on the Raven Talon system. We'll cover the good and the bad. Okay, so I'm just going to click on Start here, and in my recommended, because I've already been here multiple times, I'm just going to click on the Talon output, which is literally just a text file that's created during the installation process of the actual applications. Now, I've broken them up into sections here to make it a little easier to follow throughout the video, but what we're going to do is we're going to jump between the two machines and take a look at what this script has done on this machine and what we're going to do on the other machine to mimic it. Now, I will say that this startup of the script itself, we're going to skip altogether on the Windows 11 system. Now, I realize both of these machines are technically Windows 11, but I'm going to refer to this machine as the Raven Talon system, and I'll refer to our vanilla system as Windows 11 system, so that way they're not confusing. So, on the Talon system itself, what this script starts off by doing is disabling Defender. It's going to disable Defender and make sure Defender is not running in order for the script to run in the background. And then, during the installation process, it's actually going to remove the Defender antivirus altogether from the system. I'm not going to remove Defender. So the reason why I'm not going to remove Defender is pretty simple. It works really well. There's nothing wrong with it. It actually works better than most of the antiviruses that exist out there. It's free, it's included with Windows, and it doesn't cause any issues that I could see, at least running it. I know that some people will say, well, you know, it spies on me. They all spy on you. Norton, Malwarebytes, Symantec, Trend, Kaspersky, NOD32, they all do the same thing. Everybody will be like, oh, it's really heavy. Show me an antivirus that isn't really heavy, that runs a real-time virus scan in the background. They're all really heavy. Actually, Sentinel-1, which is probably one of the best ones out there, is about 4 times heavier than Defender is, but it's not 4 times better. It does have 4 times better reporting and 4 times better configuration in it, yes, but it's not 4 times better at finding viruses than Defender is. Not to mention, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not going to go out and buy an antivirus for my Windows operating system. The days of me doing that are pretty much behind me. I would use a free one, which is either not going to be an RTV scan or a real-time virus scanner, or I'm going to use one that I have to scan on the fly, but that doesn't give me real-time virus protection. So, realistically, why wouldn't I just keep Defender? It's free, it's already here, and it works better than most. Matter of fact, it works so much better than something like WebRoot that I would actually tell you not even bother running an antivirus if you're going to run WebRoot. WebRoot is awful. Not only that, but getting it off the machine, God forbid, if you have to uninstall it for any reason, is a serious fiasco. So, personally, I like Defender, so I'm not going to get rid of Defender. Now, if you don't like Defender, but you don't want to run this script and you want to run it the way I'm going to run it through the video, then it's really simple. You could follow the other video on the exploit on how to remove Defender, and you don't, on Windows 11, you don't even have to bother running the KB first. It's already pre-ran on the system. So realistically, all you got to do is install Malwarebytes, the free version. Once it's installed and set up with that trial or whatever, it will trigger Defender to disable, and you just go into the program data directory, change the exe to .old, uninstall Defender, and there you go. You don't have, or rather, uninstall Malwarebytes, and there you don't have Defender any longer. So that still works. But on this particular system, I'm not going to remove it. Another thing in this script that I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go through this configuration stuff here and remove or change the color palette. Because while this looks nice in all black, it doesn't really work right. So if we close out of the tab here, it's going to ask us if I want to save, but you'll notice the save portion is blacked out. And that's because the menu system does not work right with this background that Raven installed. So to me, I don't want the ability or the inability to actually view all the content on the screen. Now I know that says save and you know that says save, but there will be menus we'll find in here that you don't know what it's actually asking you for, and you won't be able to tell what you're actually clicking on. So to me, I don't need to make the system worse. So I'm not going to change the color palette to whatever they have installed here. So for this, I'm just going to hit cancel. And you'll notice that if I start clicking on things, it changes. Because there's something funky with the GUI once the GUI is applied through the actual configuration. So the next part of this thing, I guess technically, is this Edge Vanisher script. And if we look, we actually have the Edge Vanisher PS1. So according to their terms of service on the actual Raven website, it indicates that they follow the 3-tier of service, which is as long as you don't modify the who created it documentation inside of the actual scripts, they're free to use or free to modify as you feel fit to do what you want to do. So what I did is I actually pulled this script back straight off the web. And once I did that, I was able to download the PowerShell script itself. And once I had the PowerShell script downloaded, I was able to run that without the need for the Talon application. So basically run the PowerShell script to remove all of this fun stuff, which is all of the Edge garbage. Because we don't want Edge. I mean, I don't want Edge. I think Edge is terrible. It's really annoying. It's really intrusive and frustrating because even if you open it by accident, you can't close it. You got to go through all the menu system and define specifically what you want the setup to be or how you want it set up, which is really infuriating inside of a configuration, especially if you're trying to get something done quickly and it opens up Edge for whatever reason over your default browser like Firefox or Google Chrome. So we're going to see that it goes through the entire process here and eventually gets to the Edge's uninstall complete. And then it'll tell us that restart is needed is set to false. However, when we run this as a standalone, we're actually going to reboot the system after we get to that portion inside of the Edge script. So let's jump over into the vanilla system now and take a look at that system. Okay, so this is our vanilla system. And before we start this or before we kick this off, I'm going to do the simple thing of opening up command prompt. And I'm going to do ping google.com, or specifically Google's DNS. And we're going to see that it fails because there is no IP address. If we do the same thing and we do ping google.com, we're going to see that we can't resolve it. If we do an NS lookup, We're going to see that we can't resolve it. Now, the reason why is because this system has no internet access. Because again, as a proof of concept, running that script in an offline mode, I don't need an internet connection. So let's move on from here, knowing that that's got no internet. Let's now run a system info. So that way we can pull back the system information. Now, the reason why we're doing this is to prove the installation date. So we have an installation of 2/24/25. And if we look down here, we got 2/24/25. And if we look at the time, it's 10:40. And if we look at the time, it's 11. So it's been up for about 20 minutes, or been used for about 20 minutes after the original install date. So this is a totally clean, clear system with absolutely nothing on it except for the out-of-the-box configuration for the contents that would be on a 24H2 build. So my wife says I have to be nice about this video, so I'm going to try to be as nice as possible about this video. But I will say that through the process of this script, I've discovered that according to the Raven site, this is designed specifically for a fresh, clean build of Windows 11. But what I find in the script is not necessarily designed for a fresh, clean build of Windows 11. So the question is was it created in effect to basically CYA on Chris Titus's part, where he covers the basis so that way if people don't follow instructions, the script still works? Or was it designed in early versions of Windows 10 and then kind of cobbled together from multiple scripts? Now, I will say that I did search for the scripting for both the Windows 7 uninstall script. I also searched for the scripting portions of the OneDrive and the Office uninstaller that are found inside of the script for the Talon. And I found both of those things elsewhere. I found both of those scripts and portions of those scripts that have existed since at least 2016, which is a long time. So I know that these scripts are not 100% designed for Windows 11. So it's possible what has happened here is there's multiple packages that have existed for 10 years that people decided to just put together as one script to work on debloating Windows 11. So before you jump all over me, we're going to go through all of those things in this actual configuration here and do a proof of concept on this entire OS configuration based off of those scripts, what I've discovered, and what I could share with you on ways that we could also improve the scripting, because there's some portions of it that don't work correctly on Windows 11. So I've already discussed removing Defender and not removing Defender. But what we're going to do here is we're going to open up PowerShell. I'm going to specifically open up the ISE. I'm going to right-click on this and pin it to start so that way it's easier to find. And then I'm just going to right-click on it again and do Run as Administrator. Okay, so we have PowerShell now open as admin. I'm going to actually expand this to make it big. Not that it'll make much difference, I'm sure, on your screen. So there's two scripts that I have to run first on this system before we get back into the actual configuration. And the first one is that I want to run the removal of the pin for Microsoft Edge that we see down here. So the reason why is because during the PowerShell script for Microsoft Edge's removal, it removes the LNK file or the link file. However, in Windows 11, it's not a link, it's a pin. In Windows 10, it was a link, which is one of the first things that I noticed in the script as to why it is not really designed to run on Windows 11. Because you should know that when you're doing the uninstallation process for Windows 11, it's not a link but a pin. And the difference in the configuration means the difference between just old crap being left behind on the taskbar and not being left behind. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually unpin Microsoft Edge. So to do that, we're just going to hit F5 here, and that will unpin Edge, and you see now Edge is gone. The next thing we're going to do is I want to fix the menu system beforehand. Now, if you run through the entire script, it eventually fixes the right-click menu, but it's at the end of the script. But I can't stand the right-click menu inside of Windows 11. The other thing is that in the script configuration for the right-click menu, it adds like 5 or 6 registry keys, and it's not necessary to do that. That was something that existed for a right-click configuration on 22H2 Windows 11, It still works on 24H2, so I have a feeling it was probably written, at least that portion, specifically for 22H2, which is not necessary anymore. So all we got to do here is just add this one registry key. So we should be able to hit F5 here and do reg add. So there we go, completed successful. And now at this point, I'm going to reboot the system so I can clean up the right-click menu. And once the system comes back up, we'll run the removal of the Edge application through the PowerShell script. Okay, guys, so machine came back up. Now that the machine's up, we have our PowerShell script loaded for the removal of Microsoft Edge. Again, keep in mind the script seems to exist in pieces in multiple places on the internet. It is cleaned up and it is nicely organized as far as the itemization of what each step of the actual script does. So that's something that the Raven team actually did, was clean it up, without a doubt. They probably added additional things in here. I didn't search for every single line of code in here on the internet, but I did search for quite a bit of it and found it in multiple places. So it's something that likely has been used over the years by multiple people on multiple operating systems just to get rid of stuff, which, again, this is just normal things for IT, right? We don't recreate the wheel. Sometimes we just improve it, right? We add something to it in order to accommodate whatever we need it to do. So it's not that it wasn't written by Raven, it just probably wasn't all written by Raven. And again, that's a normal series of events for IT because we don't all just reinvent the wheel. If we did that, we'd be busy 24/7 just writing the same scripts over and over and over again. And that's not particularly efficient. So for the sake of this, what we're going to do is we're just going to click F5 and run the entire script as it sits. Now, while it's running, what we're going to notice too is that in our configuration here, this is the path error that we're going to get. The reason why this occurs is because the path for the LNK, or the link file for Microsoft Edge, just doesn't exist. Again, because it's a pin. But we've already corrected that prior through our configuration, so it doesn't exist anymore, so it doesn't really make any difference, and we can just let it error out and call it a day. Once this finishes, you do have to reboot the system. I suspect that when you run the Talon script, because it disables Microsoft Explorer during the entire process, that it kind of circumvents the need for a reboot on all of these steps. But just for the sake of typical Windows fashion, I'm going to reboot the system after each step. Alrighty, so this system's back up and running now. We just did the reboot after the removal of Microsoft Edge. We can see that Edge is gone, but maybe what we want to do is right-click and go to Run and go to Control and do Uninstall Program. And there we go. We could see that Microsoft Edge is now missing from the Add Remove Programs. But now we have no browser, so we're going to have to install a browser. So make sure you have one already downloaded, like I do. So I'm just going to install Firefox real quick. So if you guys didn't know already, you can still search for packages on the internet. And if you go into Firefox or Mozilla's website and you specifically search for an offline installer, you could find one, like I did. So let's just run it as administrator. So we'll just choose yes. And extract. Next, 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 install. Finish. And there we go. Now, with no internet connection, we have Firefox installed. Alright, so what's next on our script? Let's jump back over to the Raven system and take a look. Alright, so we made it past our Edge removal tool. And we're going to move down here into our Chris Titus Tech toolbox here. And we're going to see where we start to do the applying of tweaks. So the first thing we're going to see in here is the system's going to create a system restore. I'm not going to do that. Now, the reason why Chris does it is a failsafe, right? It's because people can't follow instructions. This is designed to run on a clean system with nothing on it, which means that almost 100% of the time, everybody's going to run it on their system that they use every day that has 15 million things on it. And if it screws something up, he doesn't want to be liable, he doesn't want to deal with it, so he creates a snapshot so that way you could roll back your system. Smart. But since I'm following the instructions loosely, because again, we didn't remove Defender, I'm not going to create a restore point. Additionally, in this configuration of the restore point that's created, it allocates 15% of your hard drive to the restore points. So that's a lot of restore points. And I don't need that much. I definitely don't need a snapshot like that. Not only that, but I'm also in VMware. And if I need to, I could always create a VM snapshot so I could just roll back if I need to through VMware. I don't have to create a restore point through the actual Microsoft operating system. So I'm not going to run this. The next portion of this script, which is the allow Wi-Fi hotspot reporting values, you'll notice it creates them. So I checked this. Originally I thought, all right, well maybe it's just a configuration because I don't run Wi-Fi. But that's not the case. This hasn't existed in Windows since Windows 10, 1803. I don't know why it's here. Because if this is designed for Windows 11, why is it necessary to run this? The only thing I could think of is maybe, again, CYA from Chris Titus, is let's add these values to the system just in case the person upgraded from Windows 10 to Windows 11 and is not following instructions. Another thing that I don't understand is this home group listener and home group provider. They've been gone since 1507 Windows 10. That's a long time ago. They don't exist, period, in Windows 11, any version. So there's no way to set these to manuals since the services just strictly don't exist. The only thing, again, I could think of is that he added these things, and I don't know why, for an upgrade. Because I can't imagine that even if you did upgrade and you've had a Windows 10 machine that long, presumably that Windows 10 machine was probably designed and developed to run on Windows 7. So you're talking what? A Core 2 Duo? Maybe a 3rd Gen i5? And then you're going to upgrade that to Windows 11? Doing this isn't going to help you. If you were even able to get it to install, doing this isn't going to help you. Because that machine is going to be a colossal boat anchor. But I don't really understand why this is in here. Again, I'm just assuming that he added these things as a CYA value because he expects people to do stupid things. Otherwise, I'm not sure why we would have these. The next thing I see in here is the removal of the update services for Microsoft Edge. But in the Edge script, this is already removed. So I'm wondering if this is just old dormant stuff that has never been removed from the Chris Titus script from his toolbox. Because you're getting a redundancy here. Since you've already removed Edge and you've already removed the updating services through the Edge script, why are we running it again as a second time in a second portion of the configuration? So perhaps maybe there's a communication problem at the Raven group where somebody's doing one thing, another person's doing the other thing, and they're not openly communicating like, hey, we've already done this, we don't need this to run. But I don't understand why it's here, so I'm not going to do this either. The next portion of the script, also pointless for me, but maybe not for everybody. And that's this here. This is the LMS. Now, LMS as a service, what this does, it allows Intel, specifically Intel, to communicate with your desktop to update your hardware. So the microcode update for the 13th and the 14th gen processor are pushed through the LMS service. Which means if you have a Raptor Lake and you run this script before you run that BIOS patch, you're probably going to have to do an RMA with Intel, because that means that you're not going to get the update for the LMS services or through the LMS services for your Intel chip. So this could be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you're blocking Intel's ability to communicate with your machine. On the other hand, you're blocking Intel's ability to update the microcode processor issue on your machine so that way you don't burn out your processor. So I don't know that I would run this package unless I made sure I had the updated BIOS and processor microcode installed on my Intel-based system. Now you notice on my system it doesn't have this. It tells me that the packages can't be found. And the reason why is because we're not running an Intel chip. This machine's a Ryzen. So as a Ryzen, we don't get this LMS package at all installed on our system. Another portion of this script, which I find interesting, is the fact that we disable IPv6. Do not disable IPv6 on Windows 11. Don't disable it on Windows 10. If you're running 22H2, it should not be disabled. You don't have to configure it, but don't disable it. The reason why is because a lot of modern routers and firewalls, a lot of modern internet providers, a lot of modern everything use IPv6 for the faster connection. Those are usually the connections that are running on fiber. Usually you have the old coax or the copper connections that are still on IPv4. Google is famous for that, which means that if you disable this perimeter and get rid of IPv6, then you can't run on that. And even if it's translated or NATed over IPv4, which in some cases it is, it could increase your performance of your internet connection by 30%. So disabling this, you're actually reducing the speed or the likelihood of speed on your machine substantially. In addition, if you disable this and you add your machine to a domain, if you're on a 2019 or newer domain controller, group policy uses a service that runs over IPv6. Even if it's not configured on the back end of the actual internal machine for the loopback, it uses the IPv6 perimeter. So if you disable it, it will automatically fail over to IPv4, and sometimes that doesn't work at all. So I've had issues where, like in server environments, global catalogs won't replicate. I've had issues where group policy doesn't work anymore if you disable IPv6. You could disable it, but there's a bunch more work that's not included in the script that you have to do on top of just running this one perimeter change on your system. So this is not a good idea, especially if you're going to use this machine on a domain. The next portion of this is the removal of teams, which is kind of redundant because later in the script, remove all Microsoft Office components, and we also remove OneDrive. So removing teams at this point doesn't make much sense, but again, that's just an organizational thing for me. I just don't think this is well organized to run it here versus down further. But maybe there's a reason why. So the next portion of this, which when it comes to this, I'm not going to run this. So the reason why I'm not going to run it is because it's also included in the removal of OneDrive in the Office application. So running it here, at least for me, doesn't make any sense. It'd make more sense for me to run it as part of the removal of the Office application later on in the script. So let's now move on to the removal of the Appx packages. So this specifically is the area where my wife said I had to make the difference in the video. So I'll try to be as nice as possible. This is not designed for Windows 11. It is absolutely not designed for Windows 11. So if we look at this, and we could look at this in length here, at all the things that are listed, and then look at this, which is the Git repository for the Talon site itself, we could see that Talon is designed to be used on a freshly installed Windows 11 system. Again, freshly installed Windows 11 system. Trying to use Talon on an already in use system or any older system of Windows is not guaranteed to work and could cause applications to stop working properly and system corruption. But then, if we look at the actual Appx packages here, we're going to notice something. At least one. Now, I could go through every single one of these, but I'm not going to do that because it'll make this video extremely long. And that is this here, the Microsoft Zune Video. Now, why I picked this out is because Zune Video hasn't been pre-installed in Windows 11 ever. It's only ever existed in Windows 10. And even then, it was in very early versions of Windows 10, which means that this script for the removal process of this is not designed for Windows 11. Because why would you spend all of this time to go through this configuration and add every single one of these removal processes for something that doesn't exist in that actual application of that system? So it's not designed for Windows 11. Chances are this whole script, this whole Chris Titus script, was designed for different versions of Windows 10 and then kind of pieced together for a Windows 11 script, which is typical Windows fashion. Because if we look at even the Windows platforms, there's so much dead code in those systems, it's just bloat in itself. So the irony is it's an anti-bloat script that's bloated with stuff that doesn't exist in Windows 11 from the factory. So my guess, again, is that it was created as a CYA. That Chris created and thought, you know what, I know what's going to happen. These people are going to run it. They're going to complain it doesn't work because they don't follow instructions. So I'm going to add all this excess stuff to it so it blankets a whole bunch of configuration that's totally not necessary because they can't follow instructions. And that's my nice way of saying what I think possibly happened. And I'm doing air quotes while I say that. Okay, so we're back on the Windows 11 vanilla system. and this is specifically all you would ever have to do, is you would need to know how to run this one command, this get Appx package. It's obviously easier to read this in a text file than it would be to read this on this screen. So generally what I would tell you to do is to do an mkdir and then create the C output file, or output folder rather, and then do the get Appx package and pipe it to C output appx.log. And once you do that, you could just hit the F5 key and it'll output, again, assuming you spell this right, add the T, it'll output the Appx package to the log file. Then at that point, it's just as easy as going into your file explorer, going into the C drive, finding output, and then opening up the .log file. And then at that point, what we do is now we have a list of all the Appx packages installed on our vanilla 11 system. Then from here, we can actually do like a Control F, and we could find like Zune, right? So there's Zune music, there's more Zune music, there's more Zune music, but you'll notice that we've found no more results. So only Zune music exists in Windows 11 24H2. There is no Zune video that exists in here. That's not an option in our actual Windows 11 system because it's not installed from the factory. We would have had to install that. And since this is designed to be run on a vanilla out-of-the-box version of Windows 11, why would you spend the time to add all the additional stuff to stuff that does not exist in vanilla version of Windows 11? And there's really not, I mean, there is a bunch in here, but it's not to the extent that's listed inside of that list, which tells me that it was not designed to be run on Windows 11. It was designed likely to be run on Windows 10, and even in some cases, maybe even Windows 8.1. Okay, so I'm sure you guys are going to ask now, well, what did you do? And what I did is I actually went through every single one of those Appx packages to find out specifically what should be removed and what should be kept on our Windows 11 system. And I wrote out my own package removal script to go through and remove all of the garbage that exists in Windows 11, but only in Windows 11. Again, it's a script that's designed to be run on 24H2, and why should I cater to Windows 10 or Windows 8.1 users? Especially for a Windows 11 system. There's a lot of stuff in that script that doesn't exist in Windows 11. And there's a lot of stuff in Windows 11 that doesn't exist in that script. So what I did is I went through and I created one for both the HKey current user and one for HKey local machine. And I have it set now to run that script to remove all that excess garbage. So let's kick that off here. And there you go. As it's going, I'm sure you're seeing down here in the taskbar that we're removing stuff that no longer exists. Now, I will say that in the original configuration, it does remove a portion of the notepad configuration, which causes the notepad on the Raven system to not function 100%. I mean, you can still read stuff, but saving things or modifying things and then saving them as like a .bat or a .ps1 file causes excess characters to be added to the actual logic in the actual document. And as a result, sometimes when you go to run it, it shows it as an R file and not a BAT file and fails. So in doing this manually, I didn't add the notepad configuration to it, which means that notepad will still be retained. So will Microsoft Solitaire, which has existed like in every version of Windows. I had no reason to get rid of that. Or Microsoft Paint, because again, sometimes you need access to it. And I also in this script didn't remove the ability to use the camera. So if you want to use the camera for any reason you can, it'll still function. So there's a couple things in this script that exist that don't exist on the other side. And there's a couple things that are in this script that remove things that aren't removed on the other side as well. So as usual, let's just reboot the system. Okay, so our Windows 11 system's back up, and as you can see now, we are much more cleaned up than we were before. So I think at this point, what do we want to do? We want to jump back over into the Raven system probably and take a look at the additional portions of the script. Okay, so we're back on Raven, and at this point we've gone through all of our Appx packages, so that portion of the script is done. Now we're going to move down to here, which is specifically scheduled tasks. and removing scheduled tasks that are no longer necessary for Windows to process, since a lot of the garbage from above here has been removed. So let's take a look at the scheduled tasks now on our Windows 11 system. Okay, so we're back on the Windows 11 system here, and what I did is I actually, oops, I missed a spot. I wrote out a full configuration here on how to, or rather, PowerShell script on disabling the scheduled tasks. Now, I reviewed the scheduled tasks that were listed in the other system, and I found that at least after removing what we did in the Appx package and after a reboot, that the vast majority of those things just disappear. Now, we do have a couple bugs, too, which are interesting, which specifically, if we look at, like, Xbox Save, right? So this is the Xbox Game Save to disable the scheduled test. Now, if we go into here, we could see the actual folder location. So we go to Properties, and we look, we'll see Microsoft, and then we see XBL, Game Save, which is what we have here. We're quoted out to disable the scheduled task. Now, the interesting configuration problem here is that if we hit F5, it's going to throw some errors for either access is denied for not being able to access it, even though we're running as admin, or we're going to throw an error that we can't find the actual task. So we can't find this. This doesn't exist. But if you look, that is the actual location. Ironically, or maybe not all that ironic or all that bizarre, is the fact that it still runs and it still works to disable the task. So it looks like there's a bug in Windows itself that for whatever reason you could disable the task. It says it's disabled, but then this can't find the path to where the task exists. So I'm going to go with there's a problem in Windows because it seems to work, but it still throws an error that it doesn't have access or can't find the actual path, even though the path, obviously, as we can see, is correct. Okay, so once we get through our scheduled tasks, the next portion of the script gets us down into configuration based off of group policy. So these are our GPOs. And basically what they do is they will allow you to set certain values or perimeters or create security within your actual infrastructure. This is something that I love to see because this means that not only does this script shrink the actual operating system, but it also doesn't, disregard security configuration. So we see a bunch of configuration that goes along in here for computer security or user security through group policy configuration settings. Now, obviously, if this is something that you want to do, then I would tell you to just run this script because it'll give you all of the configuration standards that go along with the group policy settings. But I will tell you right now that I ran a Nessus scan on the system already to find out specifically how much more secure this is with these GPO configurations in place versus not in place, and what they're actually controlling based off of the configuration. I did a results in a policy with my domain controller to see what these settings actually do. And while they do offer some security, it's not really going to help you much from a compliance standpoint or from a secure standpoint. Now, the reason why I say that is because the configurations are more based off of like visualization inside of the operating system, more so than actual security. So setting it to look a certain way or setting it to function a certain way in the way it looks, that's what this all does. It's not really a configuration in the, hey, we're going to lock down the system and make sure that encryption is turned on for certain things. So after the Nessus scan, a bog stock Windows 11 24H2 system with no configuration of any kind gets 41 info and 1 low. This gets 40 info and 1 low. So it really doesn't do anything from a security standpoint. So for me, this is something that I would just skip because it's not necessary for me to make these changes. If I wanted to do a group policy configuration, I would just write a group policy configuration. And that's something I may do in the future, is just write out a GPO configuration and export it to an actual runnable set of registry modifications on the Windows 11 system so you can secure the OS, maybe in conjunction with the actual or combination with this actual script, because it does work. And it is better than running Windows 11 out of the box, because it does definitely reduce the overhead. There are things about it that I don't like. I don't like the fact that it disables IPv6. I don't like the fact that it gets rid of Defender. I don't understand why it's using 1507 configuration standards from Windows 10. I don't understand why it has Windows 8.1 configuration standards in the Appx packages. It took me all of 20 minutes to actually rewrite that to fix it, so I don't understand why it was done. I'm not saying it was done lazy. I'm just saying that it was done probably in the sense of like, this is like the upgrade path. But there's so much in there that doesn't exist in Windows 11, and there's so much in Windows 11 that doesn't exist in that script. I don't understand the point. So let's continue to scroll down here. All right, so we get down here. Let's publish and push user activity feeds. Now we get into the Copilot configuration, but we've already stripped Copilot twice. And then we're going to strip it again once we get down here into the remove Copilot configuration. But again, this is going to be part of the Copilot tweaks, right? So there's a script for this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump back over into the other system, and we're going to run that script as well as the OneDrive script, which at this point what I've done is I've combined both of them and the Office and Teams configuration into one solid script, at which point then we'll get down into the service configuration. So let's jump back over to the system real quick, and let's run this OneDrive and the Copilot removal and the Office removal, and then we'll jump back over here. We'll take a look real quick at the service configuration and then go back over into the system again. Now, I will say once again that they did a good job with the script. All of this stuff exists elsewhere. This is not the only place this exists, so that's probably why we don't have any like titlement on the top of this, because it's pulled from a variety of different scripts that have existed on the internet for a long time. As a matter of fact, I've been using the Outlook and the Office removal tool script with way more in it than this one for probably close to 8-9 years. So it's good in the fact that it's shrunken, but it's bad in the fact that it is missing a bunch of stuff that would otherwise or should otherwise be in here, which I might add to that at some point, so I actually could strip more of this operating system out, because while this does remove some of the aspects of the app side, it doesn't remove the program file side or clean up the registry settings after you do the removal. So there's a lot of excess crap that's left behind after running this, which again, nothing wrong with it, works totally fine, but if I'm trying to debloat an OS, I don't want to leave just dormant, empty garbage inside the registry, because that doesn't really help anybody. So for the sake of this, I'm just going to run it as is, but I may return back to this and go through the configuration deeper to get rid of more of the actual left behind stuff inside of the registry. So for the sake of this, let's just hit F5. But actually, you know what? Before we do that, let me close this. Let's open this again. Let's go to this PC. Okay, so now that we have this PC open, you should see on the left-hand side that we do have OneDrive. So what I want to actually do is, maybe we should close some of the stuff that's open on this thing. Let's shrink this a little bit. Let's shrink this a little bit as well, so that way we can see it. I'll go right here. We can see OneDrive right there. Let's just hit F5. Explorer will close and reopen. It's going to notify. We'll see that it's gone, right? We no longer have OneDrive installed. So at this point, let's reboot the system. When it comes back up, we'll take a look on the services side next, and then we'll jump back into the service configuration on this system as well. Okay, so our Windows 11 system's back up and running now. But like I said, we got to go take a look at that other script, or at least the log in the other script for all the service structure. And back on Raven. So if we look, we can actually see these are all services. So all the service configuration in this system is set to automatic and manual. There are a couple things that are disabled, but for the most part, we're set to automatic and manual. Now, the reason why this is done this way is because this package is designed to allow you to undo what it's doing as necessary. That's not necessarily good for performance, but it does debloat the OS and give you the ability to rebloat the OS with certain functions. Like, for instance, if you want to use Microsoft Office, as soon as you run this, it's going to remove Microsoft Office. As soon as you reinstall Microsoft Office, it's going to re-enable Copilot. It's going to re-enable the backdoors into the system. It's going to re-enable all the configuration. It's going to change all the service structure that needs to change back to automatic. And therefore, what you're going to do is you're going to put yourself in a situation where running this script is kind of pointless. Because once you install Office, it re-enables all this garbage, and there's no way around that. That's part of the newest Office functions and features. So in order for this to work, you need to not have Office. The alternative is you would need heavy group policy configuration to lock that stuff out, and the group policy configuration in this system is not designed in a way that it's going to allow you to fix the Office configuration. You would need a server, or you would need the predefined group policy configurations to disable that stuff, which we may tackle in the future. We may not. I don't know how deep I want to go into group policy configurations. If you wanted to do that, I would tell you to just get a temporary server, build it out, build your own GPOs, apply them, and then, just take the system and log into the local account versus the domain account. And then you have the domain configurations for group policy standards for your Office applications saved on that machine. But if we continue to scroll down here, there's quite a bit of work that went into this. Actually, I would say a huge amount of work, because it covers basically every service configuration on the system. Now, I didn't go that deep into this, but what I did do is I disabled all the services that I don't need to run because I don't have the corresponding configurations in place any longer. So let's jump back over into that system, into the Windows 11 system. So since they don't publish the actual configuration on the services in any of the scripts that I've been able to find, I ended up just creating my own. And I did it in two different pieces. I did batch as well as PowerShell, so that way I wouldn't have to go through every single one of these things, changing the startup configuration types, yada, 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 which is a lot of work. Whereas with batch, it's very easy. It's just an sc config, and then I could choose whatever the heck the service is, set it to start disabled, and then do a sc stop to stop the service. So if I go in here and I just hit F5, this will error out the things that it can't stop, but for the most part, it sets everything as disabled. Now, if I go back over into the configuration for my actual service structure and I hit F5, it will set all of the services that had the wildcards to disabled. So now at this point, if I reboot the system, anything that was previously running should disappear. We shouldn't have any need to do anything past this point. So let's reboot the system real quick. When it comes back up, we'll take a look at what remains in that script and then do whatever we have to do on this system. Okay, so the system's back up. Now, something that you'll notice on this system in comparison to the other one is that the start menu is still intact. Still works the way it would have worked out of the box with Windows 11. Another thing you'll notice is that the start search functions as an internal search for the configuration of the system, so it can still search for internal files and not online files, because it's disabled through Edge, but it's not disabled for the local system, which is something that I actually like. I use the search function on the Windows system to quick find things. So there's really no reason that I would ever disable that. Now, you could, if you wanted to, still run the Talon thing, obviously, and that will disable it. But I happen to like that feature that's built into all Windows platforms. I also like the fact that I still have now my old school right click that works. I like the way that everything functions in the system. And as far as my actual usability, my overhead, the speed, the performance aspect of the system, if we go into the performance area here and we take a look, yeah, we're not as small of a footprint as on the Talon system. We're using about 300 meg more to run this actual operating system. But I'll take that 300 meg impact in order to still retain IPv6, in order to still retain my Defender antivirus, in order to still retain the firewall and all the configuration. That 300 meg to me is a good impact on those performance settings, just because if I was to install Malwarebytes and I run that as a real-time virus scan, or NOD32 or Sentinel-1, this number would be much higher. And at that point, not only would it be higher and more of an impact on performance, but I'd have to pay for it. So it's just not worth it to me. So to me, this is a good happy medium for what it is. But let's take a look at that other system and see what else we got going on. So we're back now inside of the Raven system for the next portion here, which if we look, what we're doing is we're going to actually disable the ability for Windows AI to disable the AI data analysis. So one is setting that as disabled. What that'll do is that'll force the Windows system to not check to see if AI is physically installed. However, since we've already defined that we have the service structure disabled, we have AI stripped out of the system, we have the Appx packages removed, we don't have the config set to enable any of that stuff, adding this in here really doesn't do much for you. You can add it if you want to. If it makes you feel better, you could just do a reg add and add that one particular key in there to disable it, but it's not necessary for what we have going on. It's not going to just automatically reinstall it or re-enable it, since the corresponding services and structure are actually physically missing. So if we scroll down in here further, what we're going to see is that we're going to reapply the desktop background once again, which you know how I feel about that. So we're just going to move on a little further down, and that's when we get to the update portion of this. So what the update portion of this actually controls is it blocks the ability for Windows to perform upgrades to the latest target release version. So in other words, it's going to set it as a defined version of 24H2, but 24H2 is already out. So having this set to 24H2 is really just going to hold you back, because eventually 25H2 and 26H2 will come out, and you don't want to be held back. You want the upgraded release version. And then once that upgrade takes place, you're going to either want to rerun the Talon script or rerun the actual scripts that we wrote for this video, because it'll reapply the configuration changes. And chances are you're going to have to go in and modify some of the Appx package details and configuration in there as well, because there'll likely be changes to the operating system in the later release versions. So I figure what we'll leave this at is this particular system has 2 cores allocated. It's using 1.5 gigs of 8 gigs of memory. I could run 2 cores on the other system. I just ran 4 so it would run quicker. That's all. But it doesn't really make any difference. We're not seeing any real CPU time. And again, 1.5 of 8 gigs. But I think before I end this, a true proof of concept, let's install Malwarebytes on this system so that way we have an antivirus and see what that memory utilization looks like after that. So I figure I'd save you the headache of having to watch me download Malwarebytes. I'm just going to right-click on this thing and do Run as Administrator. We'll do Advanced Options just to check to see if there's any settings in here we need to change. There's not, so we'll just go back and we'll do the install. We're going to choose Personal Use. We're going to click on Next. We'll skip this step because it's not necessary for us to secure our browser. Also, keep in mind, when you secure your browser, it installs proxy software on there so they can see everything you do. So if you do that, it's not a good idea. It does protect you on the browser side, but it's just not necessary. I mean, if you're doing stuff that you're going to get infected, then it's optional. You can open it or enable it, but again, not really necessary. So let's make sure that this is installed, and it is. We have real time. We have trial for 5 days. We're just going to leave that as is, and we're just going to let this thing run. And now we're going to take a look at our actual CPU usage and memory usage. And there we go. Now we're using 2.3 gigs, so it's actually worse than using Defender, which is the point that I was trying to make. It doesn't make sense to install a third-party antivirus on your system with the idea that you're going to gain performance from it. You're not. Defender is actually pretty good when it comes to performance utilization of memory and CPU usage for real-time virus scans. We'll say one more thing, is since we have this installed now, and we did run that Talon script, let's scan the system and see what happens. Let's make sure that we don't have any infections after the installation of that Talon script. Now, I didn't see a thing in there that would make me believe that we would have any virus or any infection or anything. But, hey, you never know. So let's run it and see what it comes back with. Okay, guys, so that finished, and as you can see, no viruses. So Talon script is safe, clean, good to run. Let's go back over onto our Windows 11 system. We'll compare our Malwarebytes now sitting at idle, 2.3 gigs of utilization, compared to our Defender system that's running on the scripted system versus the Talon system. Okay, guys, so that pretty much finishes out this video. I'll say that the Talon application works really well for what it is, which is a commercial application designed to be run for everyone and not just individual people. Now, I followed the instructions pretty straight for them and decided I was going to use a clean 24H2 system, and found that while it does work, it's kind of missing a bunch of Windows 11 application stack for the Appx packages that it could work better. But it's also covering the basis for a lot of systems that likely were upgraded that would benefit from that performance increase of not having all that stuff installed. Now, if I modify some of these scripts that I created, and I do a little better of a job doing so, and you know, I add some more configuration for the Office stuff to clean out the registry, and I add some more configuration in it for some of the service structure, and we kind of deal with a little bit more of like the application stack, and we run a little bit more group policy configurations for security and stuff of that nature. Then I'm guessing that I could probably get the impact of this system, I would say probably around 900 megs, 1.1 gigs of actual utilization versus what I have currently. But I didn't go hardcore into it. I only went into it as much as the Talon script goes into it. And I think that based off of what we just saw, 2.3 gigs to run Malwarebytes versus 1.8 gigs to just utilize the original built-in Defender, it makes sense to just use Defender. But obviously, other people have other thoughts on this. Leave something down in the comments what you think. All of the configuration that you see in here will be inside of the wiki. You could grab that at the URL that'll be listed at the end of this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Chris, I don't mean anything, no disrespect to you, buddy, if you end up watching this. I think that script works really well. There's just a couple things that probably should just be fixed or trimmed out, modified for the Windows 11 operating system, just because of changes that took place in the back end. Don't take any offense to this, man. I watch a lot of your videos. You do a great job in all your content, and if in any way, shape, or form I could help you guys out with that Raven thing, just let me know down in the comments, and I'll shoot you guys over my contact info, and I'll throw together my scripts and everything else. You guys could grab them, use them, whatever you want to do is totally fine with me, man. All right, all. Thanks for watching. Take it easy. Thank you for watching the Generic Tech Support YouTube channel. Find the content of this video at https://generictechsupport.com/channel.